the Sunday Mail of 19 August 2018 took a lead in targeting the forum and some of its members in order to preempt the reports that we will be sharing with the Commission. Instead of verifying the reports with the independent commissions, the government resorted to cheap propaganda in total disregard of its obligations to ensure effective remedy for affected families. A number of civil society organizations reported night visits and office raids by suspected state agents. With these reports in mind, it becomes necessary to put in place witness and victim protection measures to ensure that the state, which is accused of being one of the actors in the August 1 killings, does not interfere with evidence and due process. The credibility of the forum. In the light of these attacks on the forum and its members, it has become necessary that we issue at this moment our statement of credibility. This will give context and perspective to our submissions. The forum came into existence in 1998 following the state's violent response to the 1998 food riots, which saw the deployment of the Zimbabwe National Army, ZNA, against civilians. As such, the year 1998 marked the beginning of the forum's work of documenting human rights violations. A preliminary report, Human Rights in Troubled Times, an initial report on human rights abuses during and after food riots in January 1998, was prepared. The report was shared with the President and Parliament in support of the request for an independent commission of inquiry. The report was also presented at the UN Human Rights Committee, whose recommendations were ignored completely by the Zimbabwean government. Since 2001, the forum has ensured that the human rights situation in Zimbabwe has remained on the agenda of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, the ACHPR. Since its inception in 1998, the forum has been monitoring, verifying and documenting cases of human rights violations. More than 8,000 verified cases of human rights violations have so far been documented. In addition to the documentation of human rights violations, the forum has also litigated on behalf of victims. Over the past 2 decades, the forum has stood side by side with over 9,000 victims of organized violence and torture, processed over 7,000 civil matters in the local courts, won over $160,000 as compensation for victims. The forum has litigated against ordinary individual perpetrators, the police, the army, the ministers of Home Affairs, Defense, State Security, and against anyone who has been implicated in human rights violations. In a clear show of non-partisanship, forum members have represented even the most unlikely victims of human rights violations, including senior government leaders and war veterans leaders when their rights were threatened. Measures for protection of victims and witnesses. We hereby share our minimum expectations for the Commission in safeguarding the welfare of the victims. These expectations spell out the minimum standards by which the human rights community expects the Commission to uphold it as it goes by its work. We here emphasize on the need to prioritize the security of the victims, witnesses, and human rights defenders who will interact with the Commission. This goes beyond mere declaration that witnesses are safe, but the measures must be communicated to the witnesses. Knowledge of how the Commission operates. The interest in the work of the Commission reaches beyond the readers and followers of the state media and the cities in Zimbabwe. The consequences of the August 1 events go beyond that. As such, the Commission, having commenced its work, needs to make itself more visible and make the nation familiar with its work and its procedures. The notice published in the Herald of 22 September 2018 and subsequent notices carried too little information to allow for effective participation of all affected people. persons. The Commission must make use of the public and alternative media, print and electronic, to ensure that all people of Zimbabwe know what it is about, how to approach it, and what to expect. This must be done in the language that the people of Zimbabwe understand. This will encourage many persons with information to interact with the Commission. Respect for confidentiality. Respect for confidentiality is fundamental. Any breach of confidentiality can have serious consequences for the person providing the information or for those implicated for their credibility and safety. Physical protection. The Commission expects to receive evidence regarding the events of 1 August 2018. 1 August 2018 witnessed the vulnerability of ordinary people in the face of a powerful group of people with proximity to state resources. The events were so shocking that many victims and witnesses went into hiding and refused to share their stories. A commission with the intention to collect as much information as possible will have to ensure the physical protection of those that plan to give information. Respect and compassion. All victims must be treated with compassion and respect for their dignity. The Commission's operational guidelines must ensure that the Commissioners, staff, partners, and all stakeholders who interact with victims operate within the expected parameters, which promote respect and give compassion for the dignity of victims. Some training and support may be required by the Commissioners and Secretariat in line with this standard. Gender sensitivity. The Commission must be sensitive to the gender dynamics in Zimbabwe and the complexity of certain violations in its interaction with victims and witnesses in meetings, interviews, and investigations. The Commission must pay attention to the nature of the violations in the reception of testimonies and be attentive to the gender-sensitive needs of the victims and their families. Psychological protection. Events of August 1, 2018 induced a sense of shock on many who witnessed them. Talking about such events is not easy, especially for families and victims of the deceased, as well as human rights defenders who responded to help the victims. A process of truth recovery creates a danger of re-victimization as the Commission tries to get to the truth. As such, there is need for measures to be put in place to ensure psychological protection of witnesses. Equality and fairness. All victims must be treated fairly and equally without discriminating against race, ethnicity, religion, language, gender, ability, nationality, language, age, or political affiliation. Victims must be free to speak the language of their choice under secure conditions. No victim from any point in history must feel left out of the process if they have expressed a wish to participate. Persons with special needs. The Commission must be accessible to all as a general standard. Additionally, particular attention must be paid to persons with special needs. For example, persons with disabilities requiring special provisions to be able to interact with the Commission without difficulty or discouragement. This must include provision for minority groups regarding language or other needs. It is recommended that a special mechanism be put in place in the Commission to look at the specific issue and address the needs of such persons. In the aftermath, the Commission will serve for 90 days. Thereafter, they will pack their bags and leave. However, its legacy will go on. Witnesses, survivors, and their families will have to interact with its findings and processes for years to come. It thus becomes necessary that mechanisms be put in place to ensure the protection of victims after the Commission has completed its mandate. Prior assurance. The Forum has made it clear that it will approach with the Commission as witnesses to the 1 August events. However, the Forum also represents many other victims who require that assurance above standards, and it should be observed to ensure their safety. The forum hopes that the Commission will put in place such measures as they not only encourage participation, but enhance the outcome of the investigation. The forum pleads with the Commission to take a victim-centered approach that ensures the security and protection of witnesses. In conclusion, the complexity of election-related violations in Zimbabwe. The forum does not take a simplistic view of the 2018 post-election violence. The forum views this violence as part of deep systematic problems of organized violence in Zimbabwe, with the security sector as the main actor. This is a problem that Zimbabwe has been struggling to deal with since the colonial era. This problem keeps revisiting Zimbabwe now and then, as evidenced by the Midlands and Matabeleland massacres from 1982 to 1987, the 1998 food riots, the 2005 Operation Murambachina, incessant clashes between the police and the citizens, among many other incidences of organized violence. With this history, it will be simplistic for the August 1 violations to be treated in isolation. The forum has collected evidence that is a matter that goes to the root of Zimbabwe's human rights problem. Such evidence will soon be presented before the Commission, together with a plea for a holistic solution that seeks not merely punishment for perpetrators, but a reconfiguration of the relationship between the people of Zimbabwe and their security services, in line with the values of human rights and democratic civilian control of the armed forces espoused by our Constitution and the world at large. The forum remains ready to be at the service of the Commission in assisting it to arrive at the truth. That is the end of this statement. I thank you.
Thank you, Justina, for the statement. I will now invite questions. Okay, over there.
I just want to understand the points to the reference of the Commission. I mean, the mandates, the point of reference. There is no reference which seeks to identify the perpetrators as in who exactly may have killed people. There is no such a reference. So, with such a standpoint, do you see the Commission bringing in the findings that will actually usher in justice? Then number two is the blame has been leveled on the opposition that they instigated by their statements prior to the election during the campaign period. So their statements have been viewed as inflammatory and very alarming events. They've been blamed. So from your position, do you think the Commission will come up with findings that are not finger pointing as such?
Okay, thank you. Do we have any more questions before I ask the panel to respond? Okay, maybe I will ask Lisbeth to chip in, and then other colleagues will make their remarks.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll start with the issue that talks about the terms of reference not making any specific finding to be made by the Commission about the perpetrators of the killings. My reading of the terms of reference, yes, in as much as there's nothing that is so specific about that, I also find one reference point that speaks to the Commission having to deal with any other issue that is relevant to its work that is going to be dealing with. So I find it very relevant for the Commission to also look into those that caused the killings, because I think when you look at the terms of reference, they talk about the fatal incidents of the 1st of August. So when you're talking about the fatal incidents, we're talking about losses of life. We're talking about loss of life, and if we're talking about loss of life, the interest, at least from my point of view, and I think from a lot of people, is to understand who killed the people who were killed, and under what circumstances, and why did that happen. So I think if you read read in one of the terms of reference that speak about any other issues that are relevant as the commission may look at it. I think that comes relevant to my mind. Then the issue of the blame on opposition and things like that. I think we have to demarcate two things here. I think we should understand that protests in Zimbabwe are legal. And issues of blame and apportioning of blame to say who protested and who sent people to protest is neither here nor there. I think the commission's mandate is to look at the excesses that happened when those protests happened. And in any case, as far as if someone were to talk about whether those protests were legal or not, we have a legal system that can deal with those issues. And as we sit here, I'm sure we know that there are people who have already been arrested, and the arrests are continuing for those that are alleged to have done anything that could have been in excess of the law. And I think the courts are capable enough to deal with that. And there are remedies that can deal with those issues. There are remedies that can be offered not even by this commission itself, because this commission's mandate is very much limited. It can't even look at those issues. So I think what we really need to understand is when we're talking about the issue of the 1st of August, I don't think this commission has been set to talk about that there were protests in Zimbabwe, because we've heard several protests in Zimbabwe, but the issue is about the killings. So for me, I think if the commission misses that point, then they will not be knowing exactly why they were constituted. Because protest is neither here nor there, but the issue is the excessive use of force that we saw on the streets of Harare. I think that is mainly the main issue that the commission has to deal with.
Okay. Any comments? Okay. So I will invite more questions. Of course, this way is from Zimbabwe Layers for Human Rights, one of the members to the Human Rights NGO Forum. Tapiwa and my brother.
Okay, my question is, I understand there's the NPRC. Where does the NPRC come into this, or does it come in for? And what is the link between the NPRC and the Commission?
Okay. Yes.
So I'm late. I just want to find out, are you cooperating with the public in terms of making submissions and so on?
Okay. Can I get another one? It's okay. Okay. I will ask the panel to respond.
We are going to cooperate with the commission. I think this was the reason why we called this presser, but there are things that we wanted sorted out so that in our engagement with them, there won't be any problem, because at the moment, I think some of the things are really not clear, especially in terms of guaranteeing the protection and safety of not only victims, but witnesses and also human rights defenders who have documented some of the cases that are going to be before the commission.
And the interaction with the NPRC, it is our understanding that the NPRC is a constitutional commission, and this independent inquiry is not going to substitute the constitutional mandate of the NPRC as it has been mandated by the Constitution.
Okay, maybe just to add to that angle of the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission. This commission is a temporary commission that may just come up with findings that are reported to the president. Those findings, they may also cascade even as far as the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission is concerned, because its mandate is broader, its remedies that it can offer are even broader in terms of our constitution, which broadness is not even for this temporary commission that is only working for 90 days and after 90 days it takes its bags and go. So I think it's also an opportunity also for our own constitutional commission to be interested in what is going to be coming out. But it doesn't by any means stop it from also doing its own work, because its work and its mandate is clearly defined by our constitution.
Okay. I'll take the last round of the questions, if there are any. Okay, over this.
I wanted to ask, after the findings are made, one, are they going to be made public? Secondly, does this commission act as a court of law? Whatever is found in the court, those reports, is there going to be due court process to apprehend anyone found in the wrong after that.
Okay. Do we have any more questions before I close the floor? All right. I think with that last one, these there are legal implications that are being raised, and then I'll ask
Okay. So in terms of whether the findings are going to be made public, I think that is the interest of everyone in Zimbabwe, that this is not the very first commission that has been set up. We have had the Chiambabwe Commission that was set up. Its findings were never made public. So our concern as the forum is to not to waste each and everyone's time by constituting a commission that is going to come up with findings that are just going to be swept under the carpet. I think the issue, if we are going to be saying this is a genuine process, the process should be genuine from its inception to its end, meaning that even the findings themselves, we have an interest to know exactly what the findings are. Then in terms of what happens, the commission is not a court of law. A commission of inquiry is they're just inquiring, and their report can formulate recommendations that may see if there are people that can be identified as perpetrators of the killings. They may actually go insofar as making recommendations. Whether people are going to be arrested and to be taken before the courts of law, I think we already have institutions that are capable to deal with that. And like I said, as you are even approaching this process of this commission coming into place, the other institutions that deal with those processes, they are already there. In my opinion, they should be doing their work, and they should be doing investigations. They shouldn't be waiting. Because this commission is not coming to substitute them in terms of making investigations. If a criminal offense was committed, there are institutions that deal with criminal investigations that should be doing their investigations and carrying their mandate. And I don't think the coming of the commission would change the evidence that is already on the ground. I don't think the coming of the commission would come up with new facts that are going to be established. The commission is simply going to be making an inquiry. And this mandate is actually so limited. If you look at other institutions, for instance, if you talk about the National Prosecuting Authority, you talk about the Zimbabwe Republic Police, they have a broader mandate in terms of even gathering evidence as well, when it comes to maybe any consequences that are of a criminal element in terms of the activities that are surrounding the 1st of August 2018. So those institutions should not sit and say maybe they've been substituted by the commission, because the commission will simply make a recommendation, and the recommendation is not an order by a court, and the recommendation is not, it's just a recommendation.
Okay. Do we have any more remarks from the panel?
Yeah, just maybe to add that, to emphasize what the chairperson said in the statement, that we constantly talk about the events of the 1st of August, but this is an actual problem that has been occurred in the past. And the events were not restricted to the 1st of August. In fact, some of the events are still carrying on. And I think that links well with what the response that we've got, that the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission has got a broader mandate that can continue to look at events that happened before and after this 1st of August. Thank you.
Thank you. I had said that we close in the persons. I'm sorry, but the panelists are available for one-on-one interviews. In the interest of time, I think I'll close the discussions, but let's continue even after. Otherwise, thank you so much for interacting with us today and your cooperation as always. Thank you. Thank you, panelists.